What is polygraphy? The polygraph is commonly referred to as a lie detector, but it does not recognize lies. A specific physiological lie response has never been demonstrated and is unlikely to exist. Instead, it records physiological activity associated with arousal in the autonomic nervous system. The responses it measures are not unique to this action, nor are they always engendered by it. The aim of the polygraph examiner is to establish a psychological set in the examinee that will increase the likelihood that any observed arousal to specific questions is the result of deceptive responses. Whether this arousal is caused by a fear of being caught out in a lie, a conditioned response to the act of lying, orientation to a matter of emotional salience, the increased cognitive processing required for deception, or some other mechanism is unclear, although theories involving orientation to threat and emotional salience are becoming increasingly popular.
The word polygraph is derived from Latin poly meaning many and graph meaning writings. Literally then, polygraph means many writings, indicating that the polygraph monitors more than one physiological system. The evolution of polygraph as we know it today began in 1921 when August Volmer. The origin of the polygraph can be traced back to the late 19th century. In 1886, an Italian criminologist named Cesare Lombroso developed an early version of the lie detector, which he called the hydrosphygmograph. This device measured changes in blood pressure and pulse rate in response to questioning. In the early 90s, American psychologists such as William Moulton Marston and John Augustus Larson continued to experiment with methods for detecting deception. Martens in particular developed the systolic blood pressure test, which became an important component of modern polygraph examinations. Third, the first practical polygraph machine was invented in 1921 by John Larson, a police officer and medical student. Larson's device simultaneously measured changes in blood pressure, pulse, and respiration to assess a subject's truthfulness. This early polygraph was used extensively by law enforcement agencies in the United States. Fourth, in 1939, Leonard Keeler, a student of Larson's, made significant improvements to the polygraph design and testing procedures. Keeler's version of the polygraph became the standard used by the US government and law enforcement agencies throughout the mid of 20th century. Fifth, during World War II, the use of polygraph testing expanded as a means of screening personnel and gathering intelligence. The US military and government agencies such as the FBI and CIA began to rely heavily on polygraph examination to identify security risks and detect espionage. 6. In the 1950s and 1960s, the polygraph gained wider acceptance in the private sector, with organizations using it to screen job applications and investigate employee misconduct. However, concern about the reliability and ethics of polygraph testing led to increased security and regulation of its use. In 1888, Employee Polygraph Protection Act or EPPA in the United States placed significant restrictions on the use of polygraph tests in the private sector, limiting their use of specific industries and situations. This legislation, along with ongoing debates about the scientific validity of polygraph testing, has shaped the modern use of the technology. Today, the polygraph remains a controversial tool, with proponents arguing for its utility in law enforcement and national security, the critics highlighting its potential for error and abuse. The development of alternative lie detection methods such as functional magnetic resonance imaging or fMRI, and analysis of voice stress has also challenged the dominance of the traditional polygraph examination. Polygraph accuracy. There have been numerous studies of polygraph accuracy, some based on laboratory designs such as mock crimes, others on reviews of its use in field settings. Reports of accuracy range from around chance to near 100%. However, a thorough and definite review of the research literature carried out by a committee of the National Research Council concluded that polygraph accuracy is in the region of 81 to 91%. Which the reviewers describe as well above chance, though well below perfection. There thus appears to be a meaningful association between what the polygraph records and deception.
Is a polygraph test admissible in court in the Philippines? Polygraph test examination results are inadmissible as evidence in the Philippines because they are not considered to be scientifically conclusive. The Supreme Court of the Philippines has ruled that polygraph tests are subject to interpretation and manipulation. Purposes of polygraph testing. As we know at the beginning of this chapter, polygraph testing and interviewing are used for three main purposes: event-specific investigation, employee screening, and pre-employment or pre-clearance screening. These different purposes are reflected in different kinds of questions that are asked in polygraph tests. For an event-specific investigation, the polygraph is used to investigate a specific incident, such as a crime or a specific act of sabotage or espionage. In this case, it is possible to ask relevant questions that are highly specific.
The value or utility of polygraph testing does not lie only in its validity of detecting deception. It may have deterrent value. For instance, if people do not take certain actions because they fear that a polygraph examination will uncover them, it may help focus an investigation on particular aspects of a case highlighted by an examinee's psychological responses. And as noted above, polygraph testing may elicit admissions or confessions of undesired activity from people who believe they are better off to admit certain activities voluntarily than to submit a polygraph test and risk being accused of these or more serious activities, as well as being accused of deception. These admissions or confessions may occur during the polygraph examination, either before charts are collected or in response to an examiner's question about the charts.
Roles and function of polygraph. Polygraph, also known as a lie detector test, is a device used to measure and record several physiological indicators such as blood pressure, pulse, respiration, and skin conductivity while asking a series of questions. These measurements are then analyzed to determine the subject's truthfulness. Here are the rules and functions of polygraph. Number 1. Consent. The subject must provide informed consent before undergoing a polygraph examination. This means they understand the purpose, process, and potential consequence of the test. Number 2. Standardized procedure. Polygraph examination follow a standardized procedure that involves a pre-test interview, the actual test, and a post-test interview. The examiner must adhere to these protocols to ensure the validity of the result. Number 3. Relevant and control question. The examiner will ask a series of relevant questions related to the specific issue under investigation, as well as control questions that are unrelated to the issue. This helps the examiner analyze the subject response and determine their truthfulness. number 4, physiological measurement. The POLYGRAPH machine measures or record changes in the subject, blood pressure, pulse, respiration, and skin conductivity in response to the questions. These measurements are based on the principle that lying can cause subtle physiological changes that can be detected by the machine.
5. Interpretation of result. The examiners analyze that physiological data collected during the test determined is the subject's response indicate deception. This interpretation based on established criteria and examiner training and experience. Number 6. Limitation. It is important to note that polygraphy tests are not 100% accurate, and there are several factors that can affect the reality of result, such as the subject, emotion state, physical condition, and the skill of the examiner. Number 7. Admissibility in court. The admissibility of polygraph result in the legal proceeding varies by jurisdiction. In some cases, that result may be admissible as evidence, while in others, they may be inadmissible or subject to court restriction. Number 8. Ethical consideration. The use of polygraphic tests raises ethical concerns, such as potential for invasion of privacy, coercion, and there is a false positive or false negative result. It is important to ensure that the use of polygraphic tests is justified, ethical, and respect the right and dignity of the subject. In conclusion, the roles and function of a polygraphy test involve obtaining informed consent, following standard procedures, measuring physiological indicator, interpreting the result, and considering the limitation and ethical implication of the test.
The polygraph, also known as a lie detector test, has both advantages and disadvantages. Advantages. Number 1, can be used as a tool to deter deception. The polygraph test is often used as a deterrent, making individuals less likely to lie when they know they may be subject to the test. Number 2, can provide additional information. In some cases, the result of a polygraph test can provide additional information that may be useful in an investigation or legal case. Number 3, can assist in a screening application. Some organizations use polygraph tests as a part of their screening process for potential employees in a sensitive roles such as law enforcement or national security.
Disadvantage. Number 1. Inaccuracy. The accuracy of polygraphy tests has been a subject of debate as they can produce false positive and false negative. Number 2. Psychological stress. Being subject to a polygraph test can be a stressful experience which will affect the individual's ability to provide accurate response. Number 3. Ethical concern. There are ethical concerns about the use of polygraphy tests as they can be seen as an invasion of privacy and violation of individual rights. Number 4. Cultural difference. The interpretation of polygraphy results can vary across culture, which may lead to misunderstanding or misinterpretation. It's important to consider these factors when deciding whether to use a polygraphy test in particular situation.
One of the cases that polygraph examination has a contribution is the case of Raymond Park. Several years ago, a Yale graduate student was killed just before her 2009 wedding. Annalie was just 24 years old at that time of her death. At the time, she was studying treatment for chronic diseases. Eventually, a police turned their attention to 26-year-old Raymond Clark III. It was determined that Clark could be a potentially viable suspect after he failed a lie detector tests. The result of the tests encouraged police to dedicate their entire investigation to the man. who worked as an animal research assistant alongside Lee. Lee's body was ultimately found stuffed inside of a wall at the research lab. She was divorced on the very day that she was set to be married. Thanks to the lie detector test, Clark was brought to justice. He has now been sentenced to 44 years in prison. Before the formal examination, the subject has the right to know or to be informed to the examination that we will be conducting.
So, good afternoon, Mr. Jonas. We are informing you, Mr. Jonas, that we will be conducting a polygraph examination. You'll be questioned about the subject that will cover in the actual exam and might also be asked how you feel about possible punishments and suspension relating to it. You'll be asked questions in both an accusatory and non-accusatory manner to record your reactions to both approaches. During this conversation, your verbal and non-verbal reaction will be observed and a picture of your honest and dishonest behavior will be compiled. The answers you give and your behavioral indicators will be used to build the questions for the end test phase. The questions asked during the phase can be broadly categorized into 5 types: the personal question, case-related questions, medical and psychological questions, and test-related questions and withdrawal questions. Do you understand the process, Mr. Jonas?
Yes.
Are you comfortable now and ready for the examination?
Yes.
After conducting a pre-test examination, we can now proceed to sensor attachment. Sensor attachment. Align the dots that is suitable to each other and make sure that the color is the same in every sensor. After we finished plugging all the sensor, we can now connect the USB that is connected to the polygraph hardware. And if you can see, the red light is in the right side. That is the sign that the system is now ready. Sensor attachment to the human body. First, attach the respiratory sensor to the upper chest and abdomen of the subject. Tie the respiratory sensor through the beta chain of the endpoint. This is a nomograph that measures the breathing pattern of the subject. Second is the blood pressure or BP sensor. Attach it to the left arm of the subject. The function of this is to measure the blood in the body to know the changes of it. Third, attach the electrodermal sensor in the right hand and place it into the index and ring fingers. It measures the skin resistance, or what we call the galvic skin response. The last one, attach the cardio sensor. It is an infrared sensitization sensor and connects with PG hardware through red plug. Put some enough air pressure to the arm cup through the inflation bulb to start the polygraph test. After the attachment of all the sensors, edit and prepare the questions. If all the channels are stable, you may start.
Is your name Jonas?
Yes.
Do you live in Manila?
Yes.
Regarding the case under investigation, do you intend to answer truthfully each question about the case?
Yes.
Regarding with the stabbing the child, do you know for sure who is responsible?
Yes.
Is today Saturday?
Yes.
Do you own any weapons that could have been used in murder?
No.
Are you not sitting down?
Yes.
Were you in contact with the victim before the murder took place?
No.
Are you a citizen of Philippines?
Yes.
Do you have any motive for wanting to harm the victim?
No.
Are the lights on in this room?
Yes.
Were you present when the victim was stabbed?
After questioning, save the exam and review the result after.